Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I shape the face or sink the eyes into my plushies. Now I do this with a lot of my patterns, so if you've ever purchased one of them you've probably seen it before, but this will just give you a really good idea of what I do to sink the eyes in for those patterns. The first thing you're going to need for this is some yarn. Now I recommend using either the yarn you use to crochet or any yarn that is smaller. For example, I'm using a size 6 yarn here. I would recommend using a size 6 yarn or below to sink the eyes in. To make it a little bit easier, I'm just going to be using my Skinny Chanel, which is a size 4 yarn. This yarn doesn't shed nearly as much as the size 6 yarn. I'm going to go ahead and use that for today's video. Basically, any yarn type you use won't be seen, so you could be using a completely different color too, and you probably wouldn't be able to see it when it's finished. First thing I do is I thread my needle, and I'm using this nice long one because this plushie is quite big. I believe I found my good ones at Joann's, but if you do go out and purchase one, just make sure that your needle doesn't bend very easily, because I have one I believe I got from Hobby Lobby and it bends really easily. Just a quick tip for you guys there. And then the other thing you'll need are some scissors, but we'll need that in the end. So to start off with, I like to take my needle and insert it in any stitch on the bottom of the plushie, just between the stitches. And then I like to go right up to the bottom of the eye. Now where you place your loops that we're going to be making, it depends on where the eyes are sitting. So if the eyes are on the side of the head, you would want to collect the stitches on the side of the head. But for this, since it's a front facing, we're actually going to take the diagonal. We're going to go kind of diagonal with it, if that makes sense. So just pull out a nice length of yarn. It doesn't need to be too extreme, but just long enough. And what I'm going to do is insert my needle back a few stitches on top of the eye, so the corner of the eye basically, and I'm going to take this needle and go right across to the other side. And we're going to do the same thing on the other eye. So go ahead and push it through and then collect that loop here. Now you might pull up some stuffing depending on the yarn you're using. Just go ahead and pull that off. And then at this point, I like to go back to the other eye again. Once you get your little loop here, go back to the other eye and into the opposite corner of where you started. Do the same thing. So insert your needle and then come back out onto the other eye again in the same place. Now depending on the yarn you're using, you might want to start pulling tight before this point, but my yarn glides pretty easily through this yarn, so I'm not going to go ahead and pull it tight yet. And then now what I'm going to do is just bring this yarn out any place. I'm going to bring it back down to the other end so that we can tie this off in a minute here. And then finally we're just going to sink them in. So what I like to do is push the eyes in as far as I want them to go with my hands, and then take both ends and pull until I'm not holding them anymore, if that makes sense. So that's what those look like here. Now you might want to come back in and do another spot depending on where you put your yarn. I think this looks pretty good. And then don't be afraid to take your needle and pull out a side a little bit if it sinks in a little too much. Just kind of adjust it and play with it until you get it to where you want it to be. So I think these are pretty good. I like the placement of these. And then I'm going to go ahead and tie these two ends together and then weave the ends in. And you want to tie your ends pretty tight because this will loosen up with time. So just go ahead and tie it as tight as you can get it without doing anything too crazy. So then I'm going to trim at these ends. I'm going to cut my working end a little bit shorter and then weave these in. So like I said, depending on the way your eyes are facing, you'll want to place those two stitches in different places on the eye. For the eyes that are on the side of the head, I would do up and down vertically with the eyes, and then for front facing, you at the very least should get the corner of the eye on the inside. For example, my raccoon pattern, which isn't quite out yet, I just did, you know what, let me even grab it for you guys. For this pattern here, I sunk the eyes in. The only place I grabbed was the corner of the eye on the inside, and then I sunk it in like that, and it worked out just fine. Feel free to experiment with the placement. Feel free to do 2, 3 loops, 1 to 3 loops, depending on where your eye is placed. Just as long as you tie your ends together when you're finished and weave them in, you're pretty much set. And you can always come back and do it again if you decide you don't like it later. I've done that with plenty of plushies, and sometimes the eyes will loosen with time. Just depends on how tight it was when you sunk them in originally, and you can just go ahead and redo them again as well. That is how you sink the eyes in. If you guys want to see different plushies with their eyes sunk in, let me know. I can probably do another tutorial with the different eye placements, top of the head, side of the head. For the most part, this is just how you do it. It doesn't need to be perfect, and both eyes don't have to be exactly the same, but it just adds a certain maturity to the plushies, almost like a vintage look. I definitely think this cat was cute without these eyes being sunk in, but I also think it is worth that extra step to just bring it together. And here's the eyes sunk in on the original cow I showed in the last crochet foundations. Now this guy has a lot bigger eyes, but they're nice and sunk in, and they're not as sunk in as these ones. But that's what I mean. You can just play around with them and place them however you want. Sink them in as deep as you want, or as little as you want. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this on every plushie you make, but I would definitely recommend trying it. You can always cut the yarn and let the eyes sit back to where they were if you don't like it. That's how you shape the face, more specifically sink the eyes in on your plushies. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I forgot to mention in the beginning, but Cassidy the cow is my own pattern. You can find her in my coffee shop, which I'll have linked in the description for you. She is a lot of work, but totally worth the make if you're interested in that pattern. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you in my next crochet foundations. If you guys have any suggestions, any questions, please let me know so that I can make my next episode more personalized to what people need. With all that said, thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I love you all. I appreciate you, and I will see you later. Bye!